All right, so let's talk about things that will lead up to the French Revolution. I think this has some sound on it, which is interesting. That's good, it'll keep you awake. Now, one of the things that's going to lead to the French Revolution will in fact be the Enlightenment. One of the key things that we're going to see is a change of thinking. So a lot of what happens with the French Revolution, yes, there's a lot of physical things that happen, obviously. There's a lot of governmental, military, and other things like that that happen. But really, if we step it back, we can see some of the reasons that lead up to it are changes that are taking place in France, changes taking place cultural, not only in France, they kind of start in France and they spread elsewhere. So a lot of these ideas that set the stage for the French Revolution, in fact, are ideas that set the stage for those of you, and I know a lot of you are very interested in American history, especially in the Revolution, the American Revolution and so forth, and the principles of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence and so forth. You can go back and trace, really, intellectually, those ideas back to France, many of them, and also to England, but a lot of the ideas that are happening at this time. Now, the thinkers in France are known as the philosophes. The philosophes. Most of the philosophes are French, okay? As the name implies, I suppose, if you break down the name, it looks much like philosophy. A philosophe is not technically a philosopher. A philosopher, a philosopher is happy to sit in the office and read books, write articles, do intellectual things that have to do with the mind and so forth. They're not necessarily very interested in motivating you to agree with them, okay, or to do what they would think you should do. They're philosophers. They philosophize. So, philosophes are different in that I might call them motivational philosophers, okay? Because it has the same root, phileo, which is the Greek word for love, and sophos, or sophia, which is the Greek word for wisdom, the love of wisdom. Philosophers have the love of wisdom. But a philosopher is much more, I think, willing to not necessarily change the world. If you want to agree with them, they probably like that, but they're not going to actively go out and protest or whatever and get you to think their way, because again, they're philosophers. So many philosophers have pretty much resigned themselves to the fact that a lot of people don't care what they do, and maybe it doesn't really matter if you agree with them because things are still going to happen in a certain way. But philosophes are motivational. Philosophes want to change things. So most of the philosophes that are going to be initiating intellectual changes leading up to the French Revolution, and in fact, I would argue also very important in the American Revolution, and several other changes that happen in England and so forth, this intellectual kind of thinking grows out of what is called the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is basically an idea that the human mind is the sort of final judge of, well, pretty much everything, right? The human mind. So in other words, if I don't believe it, and I'm going to be pretty skeptical during this period of enlightenment, if I haven't seen it, if I don't think it's rational, if I don't think it's logical or whatever, then I just don't accept it. So during the Enlightenment, much of religion, especially Christianity, because that's the main religion in Europe, and primarily Roman Catholicism, because that's really the main religion, say in France. Over 90% of the people in France would call themselves Roman Catholics. The Roman Catholic Church takes it on the chin from the philosophes and from a lot of these reforms. So all of the philosophes, while most of them are French, I'd say all of them are reformers, social reformers. They want to change the way people live. They want to change the way people think. Why? Because they think they're right, and they think if you do what they want you to do, the world is going to be a better place. Okay? So, you just need to agree with me, and then everything will be better. That's sort of their idea. Because what their idea is that ignorance is basically the root of problems. I mean, this kind of thing comes into Christianity, trying to alter. It takes another little while to do it. Many people call it the social gospel, which basically sees that what Christians ought to be doing, or what the church ought to be doing, is changing the world to end all bad things. And the root of the bad things is basically bad information, bad knowledge. So if you could just educate somebody, they'll get better, and the world will be better. Okay? So, for example, in our own society today, we no longer call, at least officially, those places that you put somebody that, after they've been sentenced in court, prison. They are called correctional institutions. The idea is that we can correct your behavior. How do we correct your behavior? We correct your behavior by informing your mind. We modify your behavior by separating you from others, okay? But the idea is you can change. You can be reformed. And we're going to do that through changing the way you think. And that holds in play with a lot of things. And that's a very different thought process than what some people have, right? Prison's to punish you. You did something wrong. Now you go to prison. And maybe you'll learn your lesson when you get out. You won't do it again. Otherwise, it'll put you back in there even longer, right? Well, all right. So I don't know where you stand on that spectrum, but that's where it comes from. The idea is that, at least as I see it, and again, you don't have to agree with me, is that sin is not the problem. If we're talking about this from a Christian point of view, sin is not the problem. It's information is the problem. It's education. It's environment. You have a bad environment, you're going to do bad things. But you're not a bad person. You're not a sinner. You're not a bad person. You're just a person that was in a bad environment and had bad influences. And we remove those bad influences, and we will change you through education, through... Okay, anyway, enough about that. That's getting down a different rabbit trail. But that's where this is coming from. And that's where they're thinking. They're rejecting the church with this idea of sin and hell and punishment. And they are saying, no, we need to change the mind. Enlighten the mind. The human mind is the most creative thing. The human mind is the most powerful thing. In fact, the human mind is the final source of judgment and information. Okay. Well, a lot of this is going to take place, and again, we're not going to get into a lot of the details here. I put this up here mainly to show you that all over Western Europe, there are intellectual things going on that are influenced by the Enlightenment. Some of these are publishing. The little books up here, these sort of little black rectangles, are publications of scientific or philosophical journals. Right? Academic centers have the red dots, as you can see, a lot of them. And notice a lot of this stuff is concentrated in France. Universities. Universities, by the way, started in the medieval period. They were started by the church. They're started by the church. And of course, the church in Europe, prior to about 1500, was the Roman Catholic Church. So these universities were started by the church. They were started to train clergy. By the way, don't tell anybody. They may not like it. But you take a look at, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any private university in the United States that was not started by a church group, a denomination or a church group. Harvard, Brown, Yale, all of them started by churches. Okay? They may not claim it anymore. I don't know how much they claim it. But they were. And they were started to train clergy. That's why they started. So the oldest schools in the United States, and then any private school, we have hundreds of private schools in the United States. If you dig back into their history, you'll see they got started by Presbyterians or Methodists or some group started them. Now, the original universities began by the church. But even though the universities are going to train these people up, they are going to turn on the church and they're going to attack it. All right, so we see universities, publishing places, so forth. We see, for example, this shows you where are there Protestants, and of course this is coming after the time of Martin Luther. Primarily, everybody in the South is Roman Catholic. Well, not, it's generalization. You have some pockets of Protestants here. And mostly in the north, the northern part of Germany and Scandinavia. And then, of course, we don't have time to go into it, but Henry VIII and all that kind of stuff. And England will separate himself from the church, not so much for theological reasons, but for, I might say, reasons of the heart, if you wanted to be kind to him. At any rate, he wanted to get a divorce. And so he did, because he made himself head of the church, and he separated. So it's a Protestant church, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there, but we don't have time to talk about that. Now, quickly, because we don't have a lot of time today, well, we got like 15 minutes left, I want to talk about three philosophers just to kind of introduce what they're thinking and introduce what they do. Montaigne, Voltaire, and Diderot. Now, these names are going to appear again, so don't worry if you don't, remember them. I will repeat their names and their dates and all that kind of stuff. And, of course, since I'm recording this, I guess you could go back and you could listen to me, my melodic voice. Sometimes people in the past have wanted to record it like on a little tape recorder or digital recorder or something, and they always ask, and I guess you should ask, if you're recording someone. I had somebody record me in class last semester and did not tell me. I didn't like that much. If you're going to record me, tell me. I will say yes. But I want to know when the recording starts and stops, right? Because recordings can be used for a variety of reasons. Anyway, at any rate, some people want to record it, and then I say, I ask them, I said, do you ever actually listen to this again? I mean, if you're not going to listen to it the first time, are you really going to listen to it the second time? The only restriction I put with any recording of me, even including these, is when you start selling these as sleep aid devices, or sleep aid things to people, renting it out or selling it to them, put them to sleep. I want to cut in the profit, that's all. I think that's fair. Because that's what I figure is going to happen. You're going to fall asleep. They fall asleep when I'm standing here. I figure they'll fall asleep if I'm not even in the room. All right? Oh, there we go. That'll wake them up. Well, here he is, Montaigne. Montaigne, we'll just go through quickly a little bit about these guys so you get an idea what a philosophe is, what they do, and sort of their personality. Look at this guy. He looks very humble, doesn't he? No, I don't think so. But he is actually from French nobility. And one of the things we're going to have to keep in mind for the French Revolution is, in fact, the class differences in France. And this is emerging out of the medieval world of Europe, where there's very distinct classes. There is nobility, and there's basically everybody else. Peasants. Now, peasants are also, we're going to see, are going to become divided, mostly economically and by job skill. But to the nobility, it doesn't matter. You're not nobility, you're a peasant. If you're a peasant, I don't have to listen to you. I don't pay any attention to you. You're not worth my time, really, except I need you to do this and this for me. You do this and this for me. Great. Okay? So the nobility have all kinds of privileges, and that's in part what the French Revolution is going to be all about, is breaking down that structured society. So he actually comes from the nobility, and as a nobleman, they don't work. Work is beneath them. That's one thing you have to understand. We sort of have the idea here in good old US of A that, you know, you get a job, you work hard, you move up or whatever, you know, you get a place to live and you support yourself. And all. Nobility didn't have any of that kind of thinking at all. They're going to have money. They get the money the old-fashioned way. They inherit it, right? They get it because they are noblemen, noblewomen. They get it that way. So he studies what he wants to study, and that's classical studies and law. Classical studies, what do you think that is? When I say classical studies. Yeah.
Study of Greece.
Study of Rome and Greece, and Latin and Greek language, and, you know, all the different authors, you know, Homer and Virgil and so forth, and law. Now, he writes some things. One of the things that he writes is Persian letters in 1751. This is a literary vehicle, you know, kind of like a Subaru for English. A literary vehicle, a literary device. What he's going to do, he's going to actually borrow this. He didn't invent it. I mean, the ancient Greeks had done this. Might be where he got the idea. Is that he wants to analyze his society by bringing someone into his society who's not from it. So if you wanted to critique modern American society, you could just write a thing that critiques it as you and say, well, I think this, and this is bad. I don't understand why this and this is happening. This is wrong. This should change, and so forth. People are not going to look at that. I don't know what that is. Somebody's trying to call me. That almost never happens. But, you know, people may not take it very well, right? Because they think, well, who are you to tell us all this kind of stuff? So what he does is he creates a story where Persians, that is people from what we would call Iran, they come to France and they come to visit and they're writing back to home, they're writing back to their relatives, trying to explain what they see. And they say, boy, we see a lot of strange stuff going on here. We don't understand this, and this. And through that critique of an outsider coming in, we then get the critique of French society, the Roman Catholic Church, the king, the nobility, all that kind of stuff, all gets criticized and analyzed. And so, you know, his two main targets are the Roman Catholic Church, I abbreviate here RCC, not Royal Crown Cola, but you don't even know what Royal Crown Cola is probably. RC Cola? No? Never had one. You had it? Okay. Well, anyway, they used to make, I think it's still, occasionally you find it somewhere. That's what I think of when I think of RC. I think of Royal Crown Cola. Yeah, I don't know, I always thought it was like in Carolinas or something. Well, anyway, you don't see it much anymore. But no, I mean the Roman Catholic Church, RCC. That's my abbreviation. And the monarchy. These are going to be targeted by this guy. He's going to hit them pretty hard. Montague. What do we got next? Oh, yeah. Here's some of the common themes of Montague's writing, which are really common themes of most of Philosophes. All right, so let's let me discuss it this way. Attacking religion. Religion is always attacked, and that primarily means the Roman Catholic Church. Christianity. The dominant religion. And increasingly, you know, those attacks would get more and more brutal, more and more scathing. All right? So we're going to attack religion, primarily Roman Catholic Church. We're going to attack things like slavery. slavery was still around and being used. As you probably know, slavery was fairly common for the Europeans to be involved with it. They did have household slaves and things. The big plantation kind of slavery, of course, is in their colonies. And they do have colonies and things. But the attack upon slavery. The push for religious toleration. This was the thing, being tolerant. In our society today, you must be tolerant. Above all else, you must be tolerant. Tolerant is sort of like the number one thing you should be. This is why, whether you like him or not, Donald Trump gets criticized ruthlessly because he is not tolerant and he doesn't use language, some would say not very well at all, or maybe he's using it for his thing. I don't know how thought out his tweets are. Sometimes they seem not to be very thought out. But he doesn't sort of couch his comments in order to allow people to sort of think what they want, or to sort of think, well, like with North Korea, well, yes, we will have measured response, we will do this or that. No, he says, no, we're going to blow these guys up, or something like that. I mean, I don't read his tweets, but that would, I'm going to blow this guy up. He's a fat little guy, and I'm going to blow him up. That is not tolerant language. Now, I can tell you what else is not tolerant. Christianity is not tolerant in many ways. Why? Because Christianity is exclusive. Now, in one way, it's inclusive because anyone can become a Christian. But Christianity teaches that there is us and them. There are Christians and there are non-Christians. There are the saved and there are the not saved. Now, the not saved can become saved, most people would say, right? However, the fact that you would even suggest that some people are not just okay, just in and of themselves, without any religion, is not a very tolerant thing to say. This is why Christianity has come under attack, not only in other countries, but in this country, increasingly, because it is not tolerant. It's not open. Yes, you might say, okay, you want to have your religion, I'll have my religion. However, my religion is right. Your religion is not right. I'm going to go to heaven. You're not going to go to heaven. Now, I may not walk up to you and say, you really need to change your religion, change what you believe. But a lot of Christians think that, right? Now, I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying toleration, this idea goes all the way back, at least, to the Enlightenment. How much time do we have? Okay. Now, he believes, like I said, remember, it's all about the mind, that people have faulty thinking, they're not tolerant, they do things they shouldn't do. Why? Because they're thinking the wrong way. And who's promoting that bad thought? The Roman Catholic Church, for one. The nobility, especially the king, for one, for another. And so what we need to do is to educate these people, teach them, and show them the reason that they need. Then they'll be free from their prejudices. And so he writes this book, The Spirit of Laws. The Spirit of Laws in 1748, where he basically says that there are laws to deal with things in our society. Just like what happens prior to the Enlightenment, we don't have time to talk about here, is the scientific revolution. People like Isaac Newton and many others come up with laws, right? The laws of motion, the laws of gravity, and so on, okay? Those laws that we see, if I drop something, it's always going to fall. That's a law of gravity. If I move something, the laws of motion, friction, so forth. And they're going to take this idea of having these laws in place, and they're going to use that idea of having those laws and then apply it to a lot of other things. In this case, the way of thinking, the way of education, and the way of government. So he will talk about the natural laws of government. So these are common themes that he has. I think I can do one more screen, and so we'll try it. Because I got a couple of minutes, and I'll just make it fit a couple of minutes. All right. Basically, one thing that comes out of this sort of thinking is that there are three big groups or types of government, mostly by size, but also by the way they're organized. As you will know, monarchies comes from the Greek word mono, meaning one, and archon or archi, meaning to rule, the rule of one. And, you know, they're not necessarily opposed to having a monarch. Monarch is good for a middle-sized country. A republic, as we see starting in the United States, or what will become the United States, they thought that would work for a small country to have a republic, be more representative. And then, of course, what they're really opposed to, number three, a despot. Despotism, large empires, and of course, France would fit into this. England would fit into this, and many others. They have not only their land, but many other lands, and they rule it as despots, right? So it's this kind of thinking about government, and you can see I put the little images up here. You might recognize this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, okay? We're not going to go through all of that, but this definitely influences the thinking of the American Constitution, is really seeped in Enlightenment thinking. If you take a look at people like Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, and all those other early thinkers who draft a lot of this stuff, the thinking that they're seeped in, the thinking that is really influencing them, is this kind of philosophic thinking of government, that we're going to get away from a despot and we're going to form a republic, and that republic will be, you know, in our case, of the people, by the people, and for the people. Well, we're going to end it there for today.